We are back. All right, we finished chapter 12, and we're going to reading the next 3 chapters together, 13 through 16. Now, if you remember at the end of chapter 12, Dorothy has defeated the Wicked Witch of the West. Anybody remember how she did that? Remember, she threw the water on her after the witch tripped her with the invisible metal bar that she'd thrown on the floor in an attempt to steal the silver slippers, which would give her even more power. So Dorothy tripped. The witch only got one of the slippers, but Dorothy grabbed a bucket and threw the water on her, and the witch just melted into kind of like a pile of sludge. She ended up meeting the monkeys, and I think that they kind of turned out to be helpful to Dorothy and her friends instead of being scary and dangerous. So when we start chapter 13, it's Oz the Terrible. One thing I want you thinking about for chapter 13 is, all right, so Oz was helpful to them initially and made promises to them and said, when this happens, please come back, okay, and I will grant your wishes. So I'm thinking, I'm not sure why it's going to be called Oz the Terrible, because I kind of thought he was going to be a friend to Dorothy and the Tin Man and the Cowardly Lion and the Scarecrow. So we're starting chapter 13 with Dorothy back at Oz. And if you keep an eye out when I get to page 130 and 131 at the picture on that, because it says the little man hangs his head. I'm not sure who this is, but I'm wondering if it's Oz, because he doesn't look like the great and powerful in that picture. Chapter 14, the magic of the great Oz. We're going to learn some really interesting things about him. Maybe he's not quite as extra specially powerful as he's led us to believe at the beginning of the book. And then something really amazing is going to happen. He is going to grant their wishes, okay? But when it gets time for Dorothy's wish, he has a plan. And this is somewhat similar to the movie, but not exactly. So there are a lot of twists in this book that absolutely don't match up. But it's called How the Balloon Was Launched. And you might remember back to the movie, and if you don't, you're definitely going to want to watch the movie after you finish the book, because then you can say, wait a minute, that's not how the book was. But How the Balloon Was Launched, and it looks like he's getting ready to head out in the balloon. Here he goes. There's Dorothy. But there's going to be a little snafu, and things aren't maybe going to go exactly as planned. So that's going to be the next 3 chapters, 13 through 16. So I'll talk to you again when we get to 17, and we're going to finish up the book. 17 through 22 are like all short chapters. So, all right. See you at 17. Chapter 13, Oz the Terrible. Dorothy and her friends walked up to the gates of the Emerald City and rang the bell. After they rang many times, the guardian at the gate answered the bell. "What? Are you back already?" he asked in surprise. "We certainly are," answered the Scarecrow. "But I thought you had gone to find the Wicked Witch of the West," said the guardian of the gate. "We did find her," said the Scarecrow, "and Dorothy melted her away." "Melted? That is good news," said the guardian of the gate. He led them into his little room and gave them all green eyeglasses, just as he had done before. When they passed through the big gates of the Emerald City, when the guardian of the gate told the people that Dorothy had melted the Wicked Witch of the West, they all gathered around the travelers and followed them in a great crowd to the Palace of Oz. Once they reached the palace gates, the soldiers with the green beard greeted them and carried the news of their arrival to the great Oz. Dorothy thought that once he heard the news, the great Oz would send for her at once, but he did not. Dorothy and her friends waited for many days, but still heard nothing from the great Oz. The waiting was tiresome, and at last they grew angry at Oz for treating them so badly. So the Scarecrow sent a message to Oz, which said that if he did not see them at once, they would call the winged monkeys to help them and find out whether he kept his promises or not. When the wizard was given this message, he was so frightened that he sent word for them to come to the throne room at 4 minutes after 9 o'clock the next morning. Oz had met the winged monkeys once, and he knew their power. He was very afraid of meeting them again. The four travelers found it difficult to sleep that night. Each thought of the gift Oz had promised to give them. Dorothy fell asleep, dreaming of Kansas and her Aunt Em. At 9 o'clock the next morning, the soldier with the green beard came to escort them to the throne room. Dorothy, the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, and the Lion all expected to see the wizard in the shape he had taken before. They were all surprised when they saw that the room was empty. Soon they heard a voice that seemed to come from somewhere near the top of the great dome, and it said solemnly, "I am Oz, the great and terrible. Why do you seek me?" They looked again in every part of the room and still saw no one. Dorothy asked, "Where are you?" "I am everywhere," answered the voice, "but if you wish to talk with me, walk near the throne." So they walked toward the throne, and Dorothy said, "We have come to claim our promises." "What promises?" asked Oz. Dorothy repeated the wizard's promises to send her back to Kansas and to give the Tin Man a heart, the Scarecrow brains, and the Lion courage. "Is the Wicked Witch really destroyed?" asked the voice. "Yes," answered Dorothy. "I melted her with a bucket of water." "Dear me," said the voice. "How sudden! Well, come to me tomorrow, for I must have time to think it over." This made the Scarecrow and the Tin Man very angry, and they began to shout at the great Oz, and they demanded that he keep his promises to them. The Lion thought that he might as well frighten the wizard, so he gave a large, loud roar. This was so frightening that Toto jumped away from him and tipped over a screen that stood in the corner of the room. As it fell with a crash, they looked and saw a very strange thing. For standing in just the spot where the screen had hidden was a little old man with a bald head and wrinkles. The man seemed as surprised as Dorothy and her friends. The Tin Man raised his axe and rushed toward the little man and shouted, "Who are you?" "I am Oz the Great and Terrible," said the little man in a trembling voice, "but please don't hit me, please don't, and I will do anything you want." Dorothy and her friends were surprised and upset. "We thought Oz was a great head, a ball of fire, a terrible beast, or a beautiful woman," said the Scarecrow. "No, you are wrong," said the little man. "I've been making believe." "Making believe?" cried the Tin Man. "Are you not a great wizard?" The little man hung his head in shame and confessed that he was only a common man who was able to perform some clever magic tricks. He asked Dorothy and her friends to sit down while he told them his strange story. The magic of the great Oz. Dorothy and her friends sat down in some comfortable chairs while the wizard told them this story. "I was born in Omaha. When I grew up, I became a ventriloquist and learned how to throw my voice, so it seemed to come from many places at once. I was well trained by a great master. I can imitate any kind of bird or beast." Then he mewed like a kitten, and Toto pricked up his ears and looked everywhere to see where the sound was coming from. After a while, I got tired of doing that, and I decided to become a balloonist. A balloonist is someone who goes up in a balloon on circus day and attracts a crowd of people who pay to see the performance. Well, one day I went up in a balloon, and the ropes got so twisted that I couldn't come down again. The balloon went up above the clouds, and a current of air struck it and carried it many, many miles away. For a day and a night I traveled through the air, and on the morning of the second day I awoke and found the balloon floating over a strange and beautiful country. My balloon came down gradually, and I was not hurt, but I found myself among strange people. They had seen me come out of the clouds and thought I was a great and powerful wizard. Of course, I let them think this because they were afraid of me, and I promised to do anything I asked them to do. So I ordered them to build this city and construct this palace. They did it all willingly. Then I thought that since everything in this country was so green and beautiful, I would call it the Emerald City. To make the name fit even better, I put green eyeglasses on all the people. This way, everything they saw was green. "But isn't everything here green?" asked Dorothy. "No more than in any other city," answered Oz. "But when you wear green glasses, of course, everything looks green to you." The Emerald City was built many years ago when I was a young man. I'm very old now, but the people here have worn green glasses for so long that most of them think this really is an Emerald City. I've been good to the people here, and they have been good to me. But since this palace is built, I have shut myself up and I have refused to see anyone. One of the things I have feared the most is the evil power of the witches. Since I have no magical powers at all, I knew that their powers could destroy me. I've lived in deadly fear of them for many years. I was very happy when I heard that your house fell on the Wicked Witch of the East. When you came to me, I was willing to promise anything if you would only do away with the Wicked Witch of the West. Now that you have melted her, I am ashamed to say that I cannot keep my promises. I think you are a very bad man, said Dorothy. Oh no, I really am a very good man, but I will admit that I am a very bad wizard, said Oz. Can't you give me some brains? Asked the Scarecrow. You don't need them. You learn something every day. Experience is the only thing that brings knowledge. Well, that may be true, said the Scarecrow, but I will be very unhappy unless you give me brains. Well, Oz said with a sigh, I'm not much of a magician, as I said, but if you come to me tomorrow morning, I will stuff your head with brains. Oh, thank you, cried the Scarecrow. How about my courage? Asked the Lion anxiously. You have plenty of courage. All you really need is self-confidence. Every living thing is afraid when it faces danger. True courage is facing danger even when you are afraid, and you have already have that kind of courage. Maybe I have, answered the Lion, but I'm scared just the same. I would like you to give me the sort of courage that makes me forget to be afraid. Very well, I will give you that sort of courage tomorrow, said Oz. What about my heart? Asked the Tin Man. I think that you are lucky not to have a heart, for the heart is what makes most people unhappy. Well, that's your opinion, said the Tin Man. For my part, I will bear all the unhappiness without a word if you will give me the heart. Very well, answered Oz meekly. Come to me tomorrow, and you will have your heart. I have played wizard long enough. I may as well continue for a little while longer. Then Dorothy asked Oz how he would get her back to Kansas. The wizard confessed that her request would take a little longer to fulfill. He asked them all to stay in the palace for a few more days while he thought of the way to get Dorothy back to Kansas. In the meantime, he asked them to keep his secret. They all agreed to say nothing about what they had learned and went back to their rooms in high spirits, for they were sure their wishes would be granted. Chapter 15. Oz grants 3 wishes. The next morning, the Scarecrow went to see Oz and get his brains. He went to the throne room and knocked on the door. Come in, said Oz. The Scarecrow went in and found the little man sitting by the window. I have come for my brains, said the Scarecrow. I have not forgotten, said Oz, but I must take your head off in order to put your brains in their proper place. That's all right, said the Scarecrow. You are quite welcome to take my head off, as long as it will be a better one when you put it on again. So the wizard unfastened the Scarecrow's head, emptied out the straw, and then he went back to the room and mixed a cup of cereal with many pins and needles. He shook the mixture together again and again. Then he filled the top of the Scarecrow's head with the mixture and stuffed the rest of the space with straw to hold it in place. When he fastened the Scarecrow's head back on his body again, Oz said, From now on, you will be a great man, for you have brains. The Scarecrow was so pleased and proud, he thanked the wizard again and again. When Dorothy saw the Scarecrow with all the needles and pins sticking out of his head, she was very surprised. How do you feel? She asked him. I feel very wise, answered the Scarecrow. When I get used to my brains, I will know everything. Well, I must go to Oz and get my heart, said the Tin Man. So he walked to the throne room and knocked on the door. Oz welcomed the Tin Man and said he was ready to give him a wonderful heart. He cut a small hole in the left side of the Tin Man's chest. Then he went into the back room and brought out a pretty heart made entirely of silk and stuffed with sawdust. Isn't it a beauty? Oz asked. It is indeed, answered the Tin Man. But is it a kind heart? Oh, very, answered Oz. He put the heart in the Tin Man's chest and then replaced the square of tin he had removed. There, he said, now you have a heart that any man would be proud of. The Tin Man thanked Oz and went back to his friends. Everyone wished him joy and good luck with his new heart. Now it was the Lion's turn to get his courage. He walked to the throne room and knocked on the door. "Come in," said Oz. "I've come for my courage," announced the lion as he entered the room. "Very well," said Oz. "I will get it for you." He went to the cupboard and took down a square green bottle. He poured the contents into a green dish. He placed this in front of the lion, who sniffed at it as if he didn't like it. Then the wizard said, "Drink." "What is it?" asked the lion. "Well," answered Oz, "if it were inside of you, it would be courage. You know that our courage is always inside us, so this cannot really be called courage until you have swallowed it. I think you should drink it as soon as possible." The lion did not hesitate and drank until the dish was empty. "How do you feel now?" asked Oz. "Full of courage," answered the lion. Then he went back to tell his friends of his good fortune. Oz smiled to think of his success in giving the Scarecrow and the Tin Man and the lion exactly what they thought they needed. It was easy to make them happy because they imagined that he could do anything. But Oz knew that it would be much more difficult to take Dorothy back to Kansas, and he was very worried because he was not at all sure how it could be done. Chapter 16. How the Balloon Was Launched. For 3 more days, Dorothy did not hear from Oz. This made her very sad and worried. The Scarecrow was very happy with his new brain and told everyone about the wonderful thoughts he had. The Tin Man could feel his heart rattling around in his chest when he walked. He told Dorothy that in only a few days he had discovered how to be tender and kind. The lion declared that he wasn't afraid of anything on earth and that he would gladly face an army of men or a dozen fierce beasts. Each one had his wish granted, except for Dorothy, who wanted more than ever to return to Oz. After 4 days, Oz sent for Dorothy. When she entered the throne room, he said pleasantly, "Sit down, my dear. I think I have found a way to get you out of this country." "And back to Kansas?" she asked. "Well, I'm not sure about Kansas, since I'm not really sure where it is. But the first thing to do is to cross the desert, and then it should be easy to find your way home. And there is only one way to cross the desert. I've been thinking the matter over, and I believe I can make a balloon which will carry you over the desert." "Well, how do you make a balloon?" asked Dorothy. "A balloon," said Oz, "is made of silk, which is coated with glue to keep the gas in it. There is plenty of silk in this city, but there is no gas to fill the balloon so that it will float." "Well, if it won't float," said Dorothy, "it cannot help us get across the desert." "True," answered Oz, "but there is another way to make it float. We can fill it with hot air. Of course, hot air is not as good as gas, for if the air should get cold, the balloon will come down in the desert and we will be lost." "We?" cried Dorothy. "Are you going with me?" "Yes, of course," said Oz. "I'm tired of being such a fake. I don't want my people to discover that I'm not a wizard at all. I'd much rather go back to Kansas with you and be in the circus again." So Dorothy and Oz cut the strips of silk and sewed them neatly together. When they finished this, Oz sent one of his soldiers to search for a large clothes basket. He tied the basket to the bottom of the balloon with many ropes. He explained to Dorothy that they would ride in the basket. When the balloon was finally finished, Oz sent word to his people that he was going to make a visit to a great brother wizard who lived in the clouds. The news spread through the city, and everyone came to see the wonderful sight. Oz ordered the balloon carried out in front of the palace, and the people looked at it with curiosity. The Tin Man chopped a big pile of wood, and they made a fire of it. Oz held the bottom of the balloon over the fire so that the hot air rising from it would be caught inside. Soon the balloon swelled out and rose into the air until finally the basket just touched the ground. Then Oz got into the basket and said to all the people, "I'm going away for a while. During that time I'm gone, the Scarecrow will rule over you. I command everyone to obey him as you would obey me." By this time the balloon was tugging at the ropes that held it to the ground. Since the air inside was hot, it was much lighter in weight than the air outside the balloon. The balloon was beginning to rise quickly into the sky. "Hurry up, Dorothy," cried the wizard, "or the balloon will fly away." "I can't find Toto anywhere," answered Dorothy. Toto had run into the crowd to bark at a kitten. When Dorothy finally found him, she picked him up and ran toward the balloon. She was only a few steps away, and Oz was holding out his hand to help her into the basket when the ropes went crack. The balloon rose into the air without her. "Come back!" shouted Dorothy. but it was too late. Oz was already riding in the basket, rising farther and farther into the sky. And that was the last any of them saw of Oz. No one ever knew if he reached Omaha safely, but everyone remembered him lovingly, and they were very sad to see him go.